The bodies were never recovered because they were never buried. And the church? They ordered the soil never be disturbed again. Welcome our channel to Witchroots, where we don't ask why things were hidden, we ask who buried them alive. Between 1972 and 1984, a rural church in Braeswood, Pennsylvania, conducted 157 funerals. Each coffin was sealed, each grave dug by a silent brotherhood that lived beneath the chapel. No one questioned the closed lids. No one saw a single body, until someone finally looked. A forgotten roll of black and white film revealed what the church erased: empty boxes. Not one casket held remains. No death certificates were state-verified. No autopsies filed. Just ritual, precision, and dirt. The priest in charge, Father Elric Maynard, was no ordinary clergyman. He arrived with blueprints for an underground vault, painted in symbols that mirrored pre-Christian rites. He replaced the tabernacle with a locked iron door. They weren't burying the dead. They were offering something. And the coffins? They weren't caskets. They were vessels, designed not to carry bodies, but to attract what lies beneath. You were never supposed to hear this. But once you do, you can never go back. They said the chapel was holy. They lied. Architects who've studied the original floor plan of the Braeswood Chapel noticed something disturbing. It wasn't designed like any Christian structure. No cruciform layout. No east-facing altar. Instead, it mirrored a 12th-century European sacrificial labyrinth, one used by pre-Roman death cults to fracture the psyche before ritual absorption. 12 columns, spaced at exact harmonic intervals. Each one positioned on a resonant frequency node, amplified through buried copper plates beneath the foundation. Not metaphor. Not symbolism. Real architecture weaponized for control. The pulpit stood over a narrow shaft, 22 feet deep, sealed with a stone engraved with 3 interlocking rings. That same symbol appeared on every coffin Father Maynard buried. Witnesses say the floor would hum softly during funerals. The choir was instructed to sing in minor thirds only, a tone sequence known in psychoacoustics to destabilize emotional resistance. This wasn't mass. It was programming. Every Sunday, the faithful stood in the middle of an ancient engine, unaware they were being emotionally hollowed out. And the vault below? It wasn't a crypt. It was a gate, one that opened slowly, 157 sacrifices at a time. If you don't subscribe, you'll miss the next piece. And the next piece could be the one that explains everything. This isn't just content. This is forbidden history. Real, dangerous knowledge, hidden in plain sight. So hit subscribe, or stay blind with the rest. That spoke only in signs 200 words. They were never called monks. They had no names, no vows recorded, no baptismal trail. Locals referred to them simply as the Brotherhood. 9 men, always 9, dressed in coarse black robes, faces obscured, hands gloved even in summer. They never spoke aloud. Instead, they used a form of silent gesturing, a blend of sign language, military hand signals, and something older, arcane. They emerged only for the burials, always in threes, always carrying the sealed caskets that never strained the ropes. People assumed they were devout, but no one ever saw them enter or leave the chapel. Later investigation of the chapel blueprints revealed a secondary staircase, hidden behind the altar, leading into a deep substructure not listed in any official plan. That's where they lived, beneath the sanctuary, beneath the graves, surrounded by glyphs etched into stone older than the church itself. A former seminarian claimed the Brotherhood was part of a Vatican offshoot sect, Custodes Muti Veritatis, the silent keepers of truth. Their mission wasn't salvation. It was containment. What were they containing? A force, a hunger, a resonance that required silence, because to speak its name was to invite it. And the Brotherhood never broke the silence. Her name was Martha Teller, and at 14, she did what no one else dared. She stepped forward during her brother's burial and touched the soil. It stained her fingers black. Not mud, not loam, something colder, finer, like burnt ash. She remembers how her skin tingled, how a low hum buzzed behind her eyes for days afterward. She couldn't sleep, couldn't stop hearing the whisper. One more, just one more. Martha's brother, Joshua, had died in a farm accident. The funeral was closed casket, like the rest. But that day, one of the Brotherhood's robes caught on the handle, tearing slightly. She saw beneath the cloth, not a man's leg, but etched white stone, like marble carved with veins. They weren't men. That night, Martha dreamed of a staircase descending below the chapel, and voices, hundreds of them, crying out for air but not for help. They begged to be buried, begged to be forgotten. Years later, she dug up her brother's grave. There was no coffin, no bones, just that same blackened soil and a rusted iron nail, cold and vibrating slightly in her palm. That's when she began her life's work. To prove that no one buried in Braeswood ever died the way we were told. Buried under the Braeswood Chapel was something not built by man. In 1998, an underground survey using ground-penetrating radar revealed a concentric ring structure below the sanctuary floor. It wasn't plumbing. It wasn't crypt tunnels. It was something older, 12 stone channels, laid in a spiral that mirrored ancient Mesopotamian energy traps called mouths of dust. Each ring was lined with what researchers later identified as resonant copper wiring, oxidized over time. Embedded inside the central hub, a chamber, 14 feet across, containing what they described as a sealed cavity of silence. When audio equipment was lowered into the space, it recorded no sound at all, not even the echo of the microphone drop. That kind of silence doesn't happen naturally. It's engineered. A survivor of the Vatican's secret liturgical archive claimed the structure was called a vaultum videntis, a watching vault, not to watch over the dead, but to allow something else to watch through them. The 157 bodies weren't buried. They were converted. The spiral acted as a slow-drain turbine. It didn't harvest blood. It harvested attention, the sacred currency of ancient watchers. The more who believed, the wider the gate opened. And belief in Braeswood was absolute. For over a decade, 157 people were buried at Braeswood. Yet not a single death certificate ever passed through the state registrar. Journalist Evelyn Hart, investigating for the Harrisburg Tribune in 1991, filed a public records request. The response was chilling. No official documentation for any Braeswood deaths between 1972 and 1984. Not one autopsy. Not one coroner's signature. She drove to the old parish and found something worse. In the rectory basement, sealed behind a warped cabinet, she discovered a ledger, handwritten in crimson ink. Every name listed with precision. Beside each, a 3-circle sigil and the Latin phrase prestigius solvet, released by illusion. No cause of death. No time. Just that phrase. These weren't medical records. They were ritual accounts. When Hart attempted to publish the story, her editor received a direct call from the diocese's legal team, and someone far higher. Within 48 hours, the article was killed, Hart was fired, and the ledger disappeared. But she kept one page. In shaky letters at the bottom, Father Maynard had written, "Death is not the end. It's the offering." And they've accepted it. Hart vanished in 1993. The only thing left behind was her recorder, still playing static. Grief was never the purpose. In Braeswood, funerals weren't sacred farewells. They were ritualized activations. Every detail, every hymn, every silent tear was part of a script written to prime belief and open the gate. The mourners? They weren't attending to honor the lost. They were unknowingly feeding the mechanism. Sorrow was the fuel. Grief was the key. Each service followed the same unnatural order. No viewing, no eulogy, just a reading of Psalm 88, the only psalm that ends in darkness. Then, the hymn Come, Lord of Silence. A song not found in any known hymnal, its melody written in an irregular 5/4 rhythm designed to disorient emotional stability. Martha Teller recalled that the choir never looked at the congregation. They sang with eyes closed, swaying in unison, 9 voices in sync, like one mouth divided. Later studies by psychoacoustic researchers showed that the funeral cadence induced theta wave dominance in attendees. That's pre-hypnotic territory, the brain state between waking and sleep. Meaning, every funeral was a mass trance. And when the final shovelful of soil fell, the mourners left lighter. Not because they'd said goodbye, but because something had taken a part of them. Something that didn't stay in the grave. It started as a whisper, then a sketch, then a warning etched in stone. Every grave in Braeswood bore a symbol, 3 interlocking rings, forming a spiraling eye. Not carved deeply, just faintly scratched into the corner of each headstone, almost like vandalism. Locals called it the chain. But it wasn't a chain. It was a lock. Occult scholars traced the mark to a pre-Christian order known only through banned Vatican archives, Triamoris, the 3 mouths. A group that believed the soul could be fractured into 3 offerings: flesh, memory, and attention. Each ring represented one offering. And when complete, The sigil acted as a keyhole, a metaphysical aperture to something not of this plane. But here's what chilled investigators most. When the graves were photographed over a 12-year span, the symbol changed. At first, faint, then deeper, then darker, and finally, burned in, as if the stones had been seared from within. One symbol, evolving over time, tracking something's growth. It wasn't decoration. It was a countdown. And when the final grave was marked in 1984, the symbol stopped changing, because it was no longer a sigil. It had become a signature. There was one tape, one sermon, never broadcast, never archived, never transcribed. It was found by accident in 2007, an unmarked reel-to-reel, tucked behind a false panel in the Braeswood Rectory. Faint, warped, static-heavy. But the voice was unmistakable. Father Elric Maynard. He wasn't preaching. He was confessing. We never wanted to deceive them, he says. But once the gate stirred, it demanded continuity. The first offering woke it. The rest kept it from remembering what it was. Then silence. A breath. You don't understand. These aren't burials. They're recordings. Each soul etched into the soil like wax pressed with flame. And when the last pattern is carved, the voice that sleeps beneath the chapel will speak again. Not to the faithful, not to God, to something older. Maynard's voice cracks near the end. He weeps, not in remorse, but awe. It does not love us. It does not hate us. It simply waits. And through our pain, it remembers its name. The reel ends with 13 seconds of silence. Then a soft whisper. You are the last vessel. Who he meant, we don't know. But one thing is certain. He never preached again. Before Braeswood, before Father Maynard, there was Saint Aloria of Sabinic, canonized in the 13th century, then quietly uncanonized in 1911. Why? Because she wrote of altars where no one spoke, where prayer was not offered, but drained, where silence wasn't reverence, it was containment. In her banned writings, Codex Tenebris, she described a vision. A chapel without windows, filled with weeping shadows. An altar of cold stone, engraved with 3 rings. And a priest who never blinked. She called them the chambers of the mouthless god. And she warned. Where prayer is hushed, hunger stirs. Sound familiar? Her texts were seized by Vatican archivists and hidden in the Index of Prohibited Revelations. But a single translated page survived in a private collection, and on it, a diagram. An exact match to the Braeswood Chapel floor plan. 7 steps to the altar. 3 columns behind it. And beneath the pulpit, a circle, a pit, and the phrase. In pace tacita, magic habit. In silent peace, it will feed. Now you understand. Braeswood didn't copy an ancient design. It fulfilled one. And the church sealed it, not to protect us, but because they saw it move. If you don't subscribe, you'll miss the next piece. And the next piece could be the one that explains everything. This isn't just content. This is forbidden history. Real, dangerous knowledge, hidden in plain sight. So hit subscribe, or stay blind with the rest.